In this small office, filled with the hum of a giant scanner and the scent of old papers, history is being preserved. This is Archiving, a startup on a mission to digitize every newspaper ever published in Nigeria. Page by page, each newspaper is delicately scanned, converting fragile yellowing paper into a vibrant digital archive that breathes new life into the stories of the past. Led by a passionate Fuad Lawal, the journey to capture Nigeria's history digitally began while he was working as a journalist.
The problem actually started from when I was living on your side of the room, which is working in newsrooms, trying to collect stories. The first thing was how difficult it was to just find historical material to build context on top of, right? You want to write a story about the elections, how have previous elections gone, like from before the internet. And it just became very, very difficult to source material. And the more I spoke to people about it just in small talk, the more it became clear that, oh, this was the problem we all shared. And so we started to ask the question, just a random curiosity, which was, what if we could figure out how to find every newspaper and magazine ever published and then make them accessible?
Having an idea is one thing, but turning that idea into a reality is another. This project, to scan and digitally archive at least one newspaper for each day of 51 years, starting from 1960, is an enormous task. And Fuad says they are not stopping until every single newspaper and magazine ever published in Nigeria has been digitized.
Watch, the iconic news watch.
This project is also one that requires searching for these papers, acquiring them, and getting the right equipment to do the work.
We're like, you know what, how much of these papers exist? So we picked a focus period of January 1960 till December 2010. It's 18,627 days. And we said, let's try to find a paper from every day in this period. And we found 97% of papers from that period. And we're like, okay, so we have enough to get going. And I started to ask, okay, great. Now we need to scan papers. What do we need to scan papers? We realized you cannot scan newspapers. They are large formats with regular scanners. And so we bought this massive scanner that it turns out you cannot just walk into a random bookshop and buy.
From major political events to everyday life, the archives provide a detailed chronicle of the country's history.
We at Archiving have decided that we are going to look for these repositories of history, digitize them, bring them to you by digitization, and figuring out interesting ways to make it accessible and useful for you. Some found 100-year remembrance and obituary that was put in a newspaper for their ancestor. I did not think we were going to, I just thought we were just scanning newspapers, right?
Each scanned newspaper is carefully catalogued and stored in a digital library, creating a searchable database that anyone can access. This process of preservation ensures that Nigeria's history remains alive and relevant for future generations.
When you think about progress, society, progress tends to be built on like off the back of like existing knowledge, right? It is when you have existing knowledge you can improve upon it and figure out new and interesting ways to do things. And what are the things that Nigerians have tried in the past? How much was budgeted to education in 1979? How did it affect the generation of people that went through that? Like, these are questions that we can begin to answer if we want to think more critically today about a better future.
Their efforts is not just about saving old papers. It's about ensuring that the stories, struggles, and triumphs of the past are never forgotten. Fuad says getting this done hasn't been a walk in the park.
Objectively, we are seeing shege. Yeah. So first of all, we saw newspapers, and we're like, yay, newspapers. And we're like, oh yeah, we'd like to have the newspapers. And we're like, we're going to put these newspapers in a better condition. Like, we're going to scan them so that they never rot. We're going to even change the bound for you in some cases. And publishers were like, not so much. They're not very excited, right? When you want to buy a scanner to scan your regular A4 paper, you probably get it for less than 100k, a very good scanner. But you see, when you move to like newspaper format, you're looking at something in the region of like $25,000, right? And so we made payments for the scanner, and it was supposed to take 3 months, but it was post-COVID. We were in the middle of a global supply chain crisis. It took 13 months. Yeah, so it's just one shaggy after the other, right?
In an era where digital records have fast become the norm, archiving is providing a window into Nigeria's rich history by safeguarding it one newspaper at a time for the generations to come.